The stars outside the spaceship's window twinkled brightly as the crew of the Astroventure sailed through the endless void of space. It was just another routine mission, nothing out of the ordinary. Lieutenant Ethan Carter was at the controls, his focus fixed on the quiet hum of the engines. The rest of the crew moved about, checking systems and preparing for their next destination. But then, something strange happened. A flash of bright light appeared on the starboard side, so sudden and so intense that it blinded the crew for a moment. Ethan's hand jerked the controls, his eyes narrowing as he tried to focus on the strange anomaly. But it wasn't just a light. It was something much bigger, something that shouldn't have been there. The ship's sensors screamed out warnings, but Ethan's mind was racing. It wasn't possible. An unidentified craft was appearing right in front of them. No distress signal, no communication, just a massive glowing presence in the darkness of space. The craft was enormous, far larger than anything humanity had ever encountered. It dwarfed the Astroventure in size, a sleek, dark silhouette with energy pulsing from its core. Suddenly, the entire ship shuddered as though gripped by some unseen force. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. A violent tremor shook the vessel, throwing him off balance. He quickly activated the emergency brakes, but the ship seemed to be caught in an invisible grip, dragging them closer to the mysterious craft. "Captain, what's happening?" shouted Ensign Leah, her voice full of panic. Before Ethan could respond, the entire ship plunged into darkness. All systems went offline in an instant. Panic spread like wildfire through the crew. Ethan's hand scrambled over the controls, but it was useless. There was no response. Then, a deep voice echoed through the ship. The words were not in English, but somehow they were understood by every crew member as if the voice spoke directly to their minds. "You are in our domain now." The voice was cold, commanding, and filled with power. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. Whatever this was, it was unlike anything they had ever experienced before. And then, the door to the control room slammed open. Standing in the doorway was a figure, tall, imposing, and alien. The alien queen had arrived. The room fell silent as the towering figure of the alien queen stepped inside. Her presence filled the space, radiating power and an otherworldly aura. Ethan's pulse quickened as his eyes locked with hers, glowing, vibrant, and piercing through the dim light of the control room. Her appearance was nothing like anything humanity had ever encountered. Her skin shimmered like a dark, polished gemstone, and her long, flowing hair moved like liquid silver, as though gravity had no effect on it. The crew stood frozen in shock, their minds struggling to comprehend the sight before them. She was regal, but there was something undeniably terrifying about her. The room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with tension. Ethan could hear his own breath, shallow and rapid, but the words to speak eluded him. For a moment, there was only silence. And then the queen spoke. Her voice was like a melody, yet it carried a weight that made Ethan's spine stiffen. "You have trespassed into our domain, human," she said, her eyes never leaving Ethan's. "You do not understand what you have awakened." Ethan's mind raced. Was this some kind of attack? How could they communicate so easily? His fingers trembled as he tried to find his voice. But the words caught in his throat. I don't know what you mean," he managed to stammer. "We're just explorers. We didn't mean to intrude." The alien queen's lips curled slightly, a small, almost imperceptible smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You believe you are the ones who have entered our space, but it is not you who are the intruders, human. You have been chosen." Ethan blinked, confusion clouding his mind. Chosen? What was she talking about? His crew exchanged worried glances, but no one dared to speak. The queen took a step closer, and Ethan instinctively stepped back. She was so close now that he could feel the energy radiating from her. It was suffocating and powerful. He couldn't look away. There was something magnetic about her gaze, something that pulled at him like a gravitational force. "Why are you here?" Ethan finally managed to ask, his voice hoarse. The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a brief moment, her expression softened. "You are not here by chance," she said. "You are meant to be here." Ethan's confusion deepened. "Meant to be here?" he echoed. The Queen nodded, her voice lowering to a near whisper, though it still echoed in his mind. "I have waited for someone like you, someone who will understand what I need." Before Ethan could respond, a flash of bright light filled the room, blinding everyone for a moment. When their vision cleared, they found themselves in a different place, an enormous chamber, far from the control room of the Astro Venture. The walls were made of shimmering dark stone, covered with glowing alien symbols. The air was thick with an energy that seemed to hum with life. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he realized they weren't on their ship anymore. Somehow, the Queen had transported them to another realm, or perhaps to her own world. "Where are we?" he asked, trying to make sense of the overwhelming situation. The Queen's gaze was unwavering. "You are now in my domain, human. The question is not where you are, but what you will choose to do now." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Her words carried a warning. This wasn't just a random encounter. This was something planned, something inevitable. The Queen's voice cut through the air again. "You must decide, Lieutenant Carter. Will you stand against me, or will you embrace what I offer?" Ethan's mind raced as the weight of her words settled over him. He was no longer sure who or what he was dealing with. The alien Queen had power beyond anything he could comprehend, and yet there was something else, something that intrigued him, that called to him. Before he could make a decision, the Queen stepped forward, and in a move too quick to avoid, her hand reached out and gripped his arm with a strength that felt like iron. Her fingers tightened, and for a moment, it felt as though his entire body was paralyzed by her touch. "You are mine now," she whispered, her voice sending a shiver through his bones. There is no turning back. Ethan's heart raced, fear and curiosity battling within him. What was she doing to him? Why was she so certain of her control over him? Was there a choice in the matter, or was he already caught in her grip, just like her words said? As the alien Queen held him in her grasp, all he could do was wait for what would come next. Ethan's mind raced as the alien Queen's grip tightened around his arm. Her touch was cold, yet there was a strange warmth to it, something he couldn't quite explain. It was as if his body was being pulled in two directions at once, the powerful force of her presence overpowering his will to resist. Her glowing eyes never left his, her expression unreadable. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears, each beat a reminder that he was trapped, caught in a web of unknown consequences. The crew behind him remained still, watching in silence, their breath held in fear. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan managed to whisper, struggling against the hold, though he knew it was futile. His body felt as though it was being drawn deeper into the Queen's pull. It was no longer just her grip. There was something else, an unseen force, an invisible tether connecting them. It was as if their fates had already been written, and Ethan was powerless to change the path that had been set before him. The Queen's lips parted in a faint smile, her voice smooth and melodic. "You still don't understand, do you?" she murmured. "You are not just any human. You were chosen for a reason. From the very moment you entered my domain, your life became entwined with mine." Ethan's mind swirled with confusion. "Chosen? I don't know who you are, or what you want with me." She chuckled softly, the sound echoing through the chamber. "You will learn, human. In time, you will understand. But for now, you must make a choice. The question isn't whether you will stay or leave. No, that decision is mine." She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. "The question is whether you will accept your place beside me or whether you will resist. Either way, there is no going back. The universe has already chosen its path for you." The weight of her words sank into Ethan's chest like a stone. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Every instinct told him to fight, to break free from her hold, but a deeper part of him, a part he couldn't ignore, was drawn to her. The power in her presence, the certainty in her voice, it was undeniable. "What do you want from me?" Ethan finally asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The alien queen tilted her head slightly, her expression softening for a brief moment. "I want you to join me, to be my partner, to stand by my side as I claim my throne." Her voice dropped, becoming more intimate, "and to rule beside me as I reshape this galaxy." Ethan's heart pounded louder in his chest. A partner? His mind struggled to comprehend the implications of what she was asking. But before he could respond, the queen's grip loosened, and she released him. Her eyes never left his, watching closely for his reaction. "You are free to choose," she said, her voice still carrying that same heavy, commanding tone. "But remember this, human, the choice you make will change everything. There is no turning back." Ethan stood frozen, his legs shaking beneath him. The reality of the situation was beginning to set in. He had no idea what she was truly capable of, but the power in her words, in her presence, was undeniable. He glanced at the crew, who stood in stunned silence, unable to move or speak. All eyes were on him, waiting for him to make the decision that would seal their fate. He thought about the galaxy, the vast, untamed universe out there, filled with mysteries beyond comprehension. Was this truly what he had been chosen for? To stand at the side of an alien queen, to rule beside her in a galaxy of endless possibilities? Or was this some kind of trap, a cruel twist of fate that would lead to his destruction? Ethan knew there was only one way forward. He had to make a choice. There was no time to hesitate. The queen had made it clear. Once he chose, there was no turning back. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, and looked up at the alien queen, her gaze fixed upon him like a hawk watching its prey. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like 1,000 tons. I choose to stay," Ethan said, his voice stronger than he expected. The alien queen's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Good," she whispered, her voice filled with approval. "Then your journey truly begins, human." The moment the words left his mouth, the room around them shifted. The walls began to pulse with energy, glowing brighter, as if reacting to his decision. The air felt heavier, more charged with power. Ethan had made his choice. He had chosen to stand beside the queen. And with that choice, his life would never be the same again. The universe would never be the same again. And as the alien queen stepped closer, her presence overwhelming, Ethan realized that he had just opened a door to a future he could neither predict nor escape. As the alien queen's presence intensified, the room seemed to shift around Ethan. It was as though time itself had slowed, and he was stepping into a new reality. One that was unknown, dangerous, and filled with promises he didn't fully understand. She reached out, her long, elegant fingers brushing his cheek lightly. The touch was soft, yet it sent a ripple of electricity through his body. He felt drawn to her, like he was caught in an inescapable current, flowing deeper into her orbit with every second that passed. "Welcome to your new life, human," the queen said softly, her voice carrying a deep resonance that seemed to vibrate within him. "From this moment on, you are no longer just a mere mortal. You are one of us, part of the royal bloodline, part of the galaxy's future." Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry, his heart pounding in his chest. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. What does this all mean?" The queen's gaze softened, but there was a hint of amusement in her eyes. "You will learn, Ethan. There is much for you to understand. This galaxy, its rulers, its destiny, it all hinges on the choices made in the coming days. And you, my human, have already become part of that story." Her words were heavy with significance, and Ethan could feel the weight of them settling on his shoulders. What had he really chosen by agreeing to stay? He had been pulled in by her strength, by the gravity of her command, but now the reality of the situation began to sink in. This wasn't just a chance to explore the galaxy. It was a chance to become part of something much larger, something far more dangerous. You're not the first human to stand by my side, she continued, walking around him slowly, like a predator circling its prey. There have been others, brave men and women, who have chosen this path, but none of them have survived long enough to see their place in this galaxy change. They were not strong enough, not wise enough. She paused, her eyes locking onto his. But I sense something in you, Ethan. Something different. Ethan's heart skipped a beat at her words. What do you mean? The Queen smiled, a dark, knowing smile that made a chill run down his spine. You are different, human. You are the key to unlocking the power we need to reshape this galaxy. You are more than just a mate to me. You are the catalyst for the change I seek. The words hung in the air, their weight crushing Ethan's chest. He couldn't fully understand what the Queen meant, but one thing was clear. His life was no longer his own. He had been pulled into a web of destiny, a plot that spanned the stars and reached into the very heart of the galaxy. And now, it seemed there was no escape. He took a step back, looking around the chamber, his mind racing. The crew he had once known, the world he had once called home, they all felt so far away now. He had stepped through a door he could never close, and the path forward was shrouded in uncertainty. But the Queen wasn't finished yet. She extended her hand to him once more, this time with a firm, commanding gesture. Come, Ethan. The time for questions is over. You will see what you are truly capable of, and you will understand the power you now wield. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand. A surge of energy coursed through him the moment their fingers touched. The room around them seemed to hum, as if it too was alive, reacting to their union. The walls glowed brighter, and the air felt thick with power. Follow me, the Queen said, her voice low and filled with purpose. Ethan followed her through the large doors of the chamber, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. He had made his choice. Now there was no turning back. The alien Queen had not only claimed him as her partner, but she had also set him on a path that would change the fate of the galaxy itself. They walked through the palace, passing long corridors adorned with strange symbols and alien technology. The palace was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, its design both elegant and intimidating, like something out of a dream or a nightmare. The deeper they ventured, the more the air seemed to hum with a sense of urgency, as if something was coming, something they needed to prepare for. Finally, they arrived at a grand chamber, its ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. At the center of the room stood an ornate throne, unlike any throne Ethan had ever seen. It was large, imposing, and covered in intricate carvings that seemed to tell a story, one that spanned across centuries. This is where we will rule, the Queen said, her voice echoing off the walls. This is where we will shape the future of this galaxy. Ethan stood in awe, the gravity of her words settling in. He had agreed to stand by her side, to become her mate. But now, the true scope of his decision was becoming clear. He was about to become part of something far bigger than himself. But was he ready for it? Could he handle the responsibility that came with being the partner of the alien Queen? The path ahead was filled with uncertainty, and the challenges would be immense. But one thing was for certain. Ethan's life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. And as the Queen sat on her throne, looking up at him with eyes filled with promise, Ethan knew there was no going back. As Ethan stood before the throne, his heart raced with uncertainty. The Queen's gaze never wavered from him. It was as though she could see into the very depths of his soul, unraveling every doubt, every fear. He had crossed a threshold, one that now left him standing at the precipice of something far greater than anything he had ever imagined. The weight of her eyes, heavy and unwavering, felt like the pressure of 1,000 stars pressing down on his chest. The air between them was thick, charged with an energy he couldn't begin to comprehend. This wasn't just a moment of choice anymore. This was a point of no return. And yet, he couldn't help but wonder if he was truly ready for what lay ahead. You have chosen to stand with me, human. The queen said, her voice both soothing and stern, a blend of authority and something softer he hadn't expected. You've chosen to become a part of this galaxy's destiny. And with that choice, you will be granted power. Not just any power, but the kind that can reshape worlds. Ethan tried to gather his thoughts, but everything felt overwhelming. He had been a soldier, a man of action, thrust into a world that wasn't his own. He had never imagined that his fate would intertwine with that of an alien queen, let alone the fate of an entire galaxy. He was just a human, a mere mortal. And yet here he was, standing on the threshold of unimaginable power. "What do you mean by power?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What does this power have to do with me?" The queen's lips curled into a faint smile. She rose from the throne, stepping toward him with a grace that seemed otherworldly. "The power you will wield is not just physical," she said, her voice dropping to a tone that sent shivers down his spine. "It is the power of influence, of leadership. You will shape the future. You will influence the decisions of the great houses of this galaxy." Her words seemed to echo through the very air around them, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was a destiny that had been laid out long before he had even arrived. The magnitude of the task was nearly suffocating, but beneath it all, there was something else, a deep, unshakable truth. "I'm just one man," Ethan said, his voice tinged with doubt. "How could I possibly influence the galaxy?" The queen stepped closer, her presence enveloping him. "You are no longer just one man. The moment you accepted me, accepted this fate, you became something more. You are my chosen, and through our bond, you will command not only the forces of this palace, but the loyalty of those who follow us. You will stand as a ruler in your own right." Ethan was speechless, his mind racing. He had gone from being a soldier fighting for his life in a distant galaxy to standing beside a powerful alien queen, tasked with the unimaginable responsibility of helping shape the fate of an entire civilization. The queen's hand gently touched his shoulder, grounding him. "I will guide you, but only you can walk this path. The future of our kind, of humanity, of the galaxy itself, lies in your hands now." Her words weren't just a promise. They were a challenge. A challenge Ethan wasn't sure he was ready to face, but he knew he couldn't walk away from. As he stood there, trying to process the weight of her words, the queen's grip on his shoulder tightened slightly, as though reminding him that his decision was already made. There was no going back. Ethan looked around the grand chamber. The towering walls seemed to close in on him, as if the palace itself was watching him, waiting for him to accept his new role. His gaze returned to the queen, whose eyes shone with the same resolute determination that had drawn him into her orbit in the first place. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Ethan said quietly, his voice betraying the fear and uncertainty he felt deep inside. The queen tilted her head, her lips curving into a smile that was both comforting and intimidating. "None of us are ready for what we must become. But that is the nature of power, human. It molds us into something new, something that serves a greater purpose." With a sudden, fluid movement, she took his hand, guiding him forward. The air around them seemed to crackle with energy, and as they walked through the chamber together, the weight of their shared destiny began to sink in even more. Ethan's mind swirled with questions, but none of them seemed to matter now. He was part of something larger than himself, and the future was unfolding before him, one step at a time. The queen led him to a large, ornate doorway, its surface etched with strange symbols and alien writing. As they stepped through, Ethan felt a surge of energy, as though the very fabric of space was shifting around them. They had entered a new realm, one where power, destiny, and the future of the galaxy would be determined by their choices. Ethan's heart raced in his chest as he realized that, despite his doubts, he was already in too deep. There was no escape from the path ahead, and as they ventured deeper into the palace, the weight of his new reality settled in. This was only the beginning, and there was no turning back. As Ethan followed the Queen through the darkened halls, the silence around them was deafening. Every step seemed to echo, filling the vast space with an unsettling tension. The palace, with its ornate architecture and alien symbols, felt both grand and intimidating. Yet in this silence, Ethan couldn't help but feel a strange sense of connection to the place. Perhaps it was the magnitude of the responsibility, or perhaps it was the alien presence beside him that made everything seem more real. The Queen led him through an immense chamber filled with holographic projections, strange floating lights, and images of distant worlds that hovered in the air like constellations. Everything about the room seemed to hum with a purpose, as though it had been designed for something far beyond mere decoration. There was power here, raw, untapped, and awaiting someone to harness it. They approached a large table at the center of the room, where a holographic map of the galaxy hovered in midair, constantly shifting and reorganizing itself. Ethan studied it, intrigued. Star systems, planets, and alien civilizations filled the projection, each one marked with symbols he didn't understand. His eyes darted back and forth, trying to make sense of the complex web of interconnected worlds. "This is the scope of the task ahead," the Queen said, her voice steady and unyielding, as she gestured toward the map. "The fate of this galaxy rests in the decisions we make. Your role in this will shape the future." Ethan's eyes lingered on the holographic map, his mind racing. "I don't even know where to begin," he muttered, overwhelmed by the vastness of what he was being asked to do. The Queen's gaze softened, though her eyes still held that piercing intensity. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder, a grounding presence in the midst of his confusion. "We will start where you are most needed. It's not about knowing everything. It's about understanding that every choice matters. We will face challenges together, and through it, you will learn." The warmth of her touch sent a shiver through him, not because it was uncomfortable, but because of the gravity in it. He could sense that this wasn't just some passing moment. This was the beginning of something far more complex. The Queen's grip on him wasn't just a symbol of power. It was a promise of partnership. They were bound together now, whether by destiny or choice. As they stood over the map, the room seemed to shift around them. One of the projections flickered, and a new image appeared, a distant star system, surrounded by dark clouds, with an unfamiliar planet at its core. The Queen's face darkened, her gaze sharpening. "This is the Toriel system," she said, her voice low and cautious. "It is a system that has long been under the control of the Varisi, an ancient and power-hungry race that has manipulated the galaxy for centuries. They are a threat to everything we stand for." Ethan frowned, leaning in closer to the hologram. Why haven't they been dealt with before? The Queen's expression hardened. Because of political alliances, weak leadership, and the hesitation of those who fear their power. But the Varisi have begun to move, and they are more dangerous than ever. Ethan's pulse quickened. He had known he was getting involved in something larger than himself, but this was bigger than anything he had imagined. He was no longer just a soldier. He was now a key player in the future of a galaxy teetering on the brink of war. "Do you think we can stop them?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. The Queen's eyes glimmered with determination. "We must. There is no other option. If we fail, the galaxy will fall under their control. But we are not without allies. Together, we can build an army that stands against them." Her words were powerful, and they sparked something in Ethan, a fire he hadn't realized was there. He wasn't alone anymore. He had the Queen at his side, and that gave him hope, even if the odds seemed insurmountable. As the hologram of the Toriel system spun before them, Ethan felt his resolve harden. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to stop now. He had chosen this path, and now it was time to step up and face whatever challenges lay ahead. The Queen turned to him, her voice firm and clear. "I trust you, human, and together we will make sure the Varisi never have the chance to rule." For the first time since his arrival, Ethan felt a sense of purpose. He was no longer just a soldier. He was part of something much greater. And as he looked at the map, knowing the galaxy was at stake, he understood the weight of the Queen's trust. There was no turning back now. Ethan stood at the front lines, his heart pounding as he looked out over the battlefield. The alien world stretched out before him, bathed in the glow of an unfamiliar twin sunset. It felt like a dream, but the reality of the moment was too real to deny. The alien forces had assembled, ready for battle, but so had the human forces that the Queen had gathered under her command. Beside him, the Queen stood tall and resolute, her regal presence cutting through the chaos of the battlefield. Her once cold demeanor was now tempered with the fire of someone who had fought and sacrificed everything to get to this moment. Ethan couldn't help but feel a surge of admiration for her. She was more than a ruler. She was a warrior. "You've trained your people well," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "I didn't expect to see such unity." The Queen's lips curved into a small smile, though it was tinged with a sense of bittersweet pride. "They are united by a cause, not by blood. The Varisi have threatened everything we hold dear. But it is not just our fight. It's the fight of all the innocent lives they seek to destroy." Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The stakes had never been higher. This wasn't just a battle for power. It was a battle for survival, for the future of an entire galaxy. The sky above them rumbled, and the distant sound of warships could be heard as they began their descent toward the battlefield. The Varisi were coming. Ethan took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the weapon at his side. He wasn't a soldier because he wanted to be. He was a soldier because it was the only way to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And now, standing beside the Queen, he realized that he wasn't just fighting for the humans. He was fighting for the galaxy itself. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble as the Varisi army made its approach. Thousands of ships filled the sky, blotting out the sun, their dark shadows spreading across the battlefield like a storm. The sound of their engines grew louder, and Ethan's chest tightened. There was no turning back now. "We have one chance at this," the Queen said, her voice cold but full of determination. "Once we engage, there is no retreat. If we lose here, it will not just be the end of us. It will be the end of everything." Ethan's resolve hardened. He looked at the Queen, meeting her eyes. In that moment, he understood. They were not just allies. They were the last line of defense for everything they had ever known. Their bond had grown beyond mere necessity. It had become a promise. The Varisi fleet began to land, their soldiers pouring out onto the battlefield with ruthless precision. But Ethan and the Queen's forces were ready. The battle began in an explosion of chaos, the air filled with the deafening sounds of weapons firing and ships crashing to the ground. Ethan charged forward with the Queen at his side, their bond stronger than ever. In the thick of battle, the Queen's presence was like a beacon, her powers lighting up the battlefield as she unleashed wave after wave of energy. The Varisi forces fell back, but they were relentless. The Queen fought with a fury unlike anything Ethan had ever seen before, her alien strength overwhelming their enemies. But it was clear this was only the beginning. Ethan fought alongside her, his human determination fueling his every move. He knew the stakes, and he knew the risk. But he also knew this was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment to prove that humanity had a place in this galaxy, a place worth fighting for. The battle raged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. But slowly they began to make progress. The Varisi were being pushed back, their forces retreating in disarray. Ethan could see the Queen's power starting to take its toll, her energy draining as she fought. But she refused to stop. In the midst of the chaos, Ethan realized something. The Queen was not just a ruler. She was the heart of this galaxy's resistance, the driving force that gave the people hope. Without her, none of this would have been possible. Finally, with a fierce cry, the Queen unleashed one final burst of energy, her powers overwhelming the Varisi forces. The remaining soldiers scattered in defeat, their fleet in disarray. The battle was over. But the price had been high. The battlefield was littered with the remains of fallen soldiers, both human and alien. As the dust began to settle, Ethan looked over at the Queen. Her face was pale, her strength clearly drained, but her eyes still held that fire. "We did it," Ethan said, his voice soft but filled with awe. The Queen nodded, her hand resting on his shoulder. "We did. But this is only the beginning. There will always be threats, always forces seeking to divide us. But today we prove that we are stronger together." Ethan smiled, the weight of the victory settling over him. They had won, but more importantly, they had forged a bond that would last beyond this battle, an alliance that could change the future of the galaxy. And as he stood beside the Queen, he knew that the fight was far from over. But whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And that was all that mattered.